Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the October 2022 My Creative Scrapbook Limited Edition kit. This kit had an absolutely gorgeous 49 and Market collection called Art Options Alina. I love the teal and the coral colors that are in this collection. You'll see those papers in just a moment. First, I'm working with this window laser cut and I'm cutting my photo to size. I'm going to put my photo behind the laser cut. I usually use pieces like this as layering pieces and I'll put my photo on top of them. But I just like the idea of having my dog Jackson, who's in the photo, looking out of the window because that's something that he does all day long. He sits on my daughter Julia's bed and he looks out the window. I'm inking the edges, both the outside and the inside edges, with some distress ink in Vintage Photo. Vintage Photo is one of my go-to colors for inking edges, and it was perfect for this laser cut because it is brown. I used some ATG adhesive and I attached the frame down to the photo. I positioned the panes of the window so that his face would be centered in one of them. I didn't want his face to get divided by the die cut. I'm using this beautiful piece of pattern paper. I love the way the flowers are at the top. And then I'm also using this large die cut. It has a white border that I want to keep. I just wanted to cut it back in a couple of places. And now I'm using some white cardstock and I'm tracing around the outside of the frame. I wanted to have a piece of white cardstock to mount behind the photo. This would help to just make this whole unit a little bit more sturdy. And this is something that I do all the time, especially when I'm going to pop something up using some foam, and that's exactly what I'm going to do here. So I wanted to make sure that before I threw away the back of the photo that I wrote down the date. I used to be terrible at this. And I would have a whole stack of layouts and I wouldn't remember what dates the photos were from. I always thought that I would remember, but then of course I did not. So I have labels that I made on which I write the date. I will also sometimes take a picture of the back of the photo with my camera. I definitely don't want to have another stack of layouts where I can't find the dates and I don't know which albums to put the layouts in. Using the photo, that large floral die cut, and then a beautiful spray of leaves, I am creating a cluster and I attached all of these elements together and I put some fun foam behind each of them to pop them up a little bit. I find that popping up the photo is essential when I want to use these beautiful dimensional flowers on the page. I don't want the flowers to be popping up over the photo, so it's really important to having the whole layout look balanced and making everything look like it is one cohesive unit. Here I'm taking the stem of one of the leaves and I am wrapping it around this tool, and this helps to create a little spiral, and I'm going to bend this wire back against the leaf and I'm going to place it on the layout, and the spiral just adds a little bit of texture and then it adds something a little bit different to the page. So my goal here is to create a large cluster and to have all of the elements attached down to the cluster rather than to the background paper. I do this often when I want to put some mixed media on the background. It also helps me to be able to position the cluster. Sometimes I'll add to the cluster and then if I'm attaching it to the background, the cluster will kind of be off-centered or not exactly where I want it on the layout. So this is something that I do a lot, and I think that it really helps me with the whole composition of the page. So I attached some thick white pieces of cardstock to the back of the cluster, and that helped to give me like little shelves to attach some of the beautiful flowers and flower buds and leaves to, so that I would have just that one unit. Now I'm inking the edges of these butterflies. I'm using some distress ink in black soot. And then I was thinking that it would look nice to carry that black soot over to the frame that surrounds the photo. So I added some of the distress ink there. I always want the photo to be the most prominent thing on my layouts. So I was thinking that the butterflies inked with the black soot would command a lot of attention, and I didn't want to take attention away from my photo. That's why I decided to ink that as well. I just love adding butterflies to layouts, and I really like when they come in different sizes like this. I think that just makes them all the more interesting. And of course, they are these beautiful blue and coral colors that I think are just stunning. And to help them pop up off the page, I'm putting a little bit of foam on both of their wings, and then I put some adhesive on both the foam and on the center of the butterfly, and I push down on the center, and that makes the wings pop up. I mentioned that on so many of my videos, but just in case you haven't heard it, I just think that it adds a nice little bit of dimension and just makes the butterflies look like they're in flight and ready to fly across the page. I use some of the packaging from the kit. I love using the packaging from 49 and Market Collections, and I use a punch in my stash. It's a Martha Stewart branch, and I punched out a number of them to tuck into different places on the cluster. I love putting leaves and other greenery, florals, all of that good stuff on the edges of big clusters like this. I just think that it helps to make them look less solid and just a little bit more airy, and helps to transition the large cluster into the background. One of the nice things about the flowers that we get in the kit is that you can separate the layers. If a flower is a little bit too big, you can peel off some of the larger back layers, and then you're left with a smaller flower. So that's what I did to this coral flower here. I just made it a tiny bit smaller. Now I'm cutting away some of the excess white paper that I had attached on before. I wanted to make sure I had enough, and it's easy at the end to just trim away whatever it is that is not needed. And then I'm using the ATG adhesive to hold these flowers in place temporarily, but I will have to add some wet adhesive to hold these flowers in place on the layout. I love this sentiment, "Fill My Heart." I wanted to use it underneath the photo, and I wanted to use this piece of paper behind it as a matte, but I wanted it to be a little bit darker, so I used some Distress Oxide in Uncharted Mariner to darken it up a little bit. Unfortunately, there's no really exact match for this teal color among the Distress Oxide colors, and I use those all the time, but this is pretty close. It's more of a blue than a greenish blue, but I think that it works. Our dog Jackson, he is just such a sweet dog, so gentle, so kind. He was unfortunately, it seems, rather severely abused when he was a puppy. And although he's so much better than when we first got him, he is definitely still showing scars from his bad experiences when he was a puppy. But he seems really happy now. And although he's a very nervous boy, he is just the sweetest. But when I saw that title, Sweetest, I thought that would be perfect for this layout. I'm going to add to the title a little bit in a little while. I'm using the stencil from the kit, and I'm using some heavy Finnabair gesso and a sponge, and I'm just going to create a very light bit of texture on the background using this stencil. I think that this is a great way to add just a subtle little bit of pattern and texture in the background. I often use modeling paste through a stencil, but I thought that for this particular layout, I didn't want to add that extra bit of dimension in the background. I just wanted to add a little touch of this beautiful pattern that's on the stencil. With modeling paste, sometimes I'm worried about overdoing it, but I never really worry about this technique, especially on these 49 and Market papers, because there's already so much variation on these papers that just adding another layer of another pattern, especially when it's so subtle, I really don't think that it would be easy to overdo it and to add too much. I continued adding this pattern to the background for quite a while, so I cut out a little bit of that footage, but I just continued doing the same thing with the sponge and the white gesso. And now I'm working on my title. The title is going to be Sweetest Boy, so I had to add the word boy to the layout. And so I'm using some die cut letters. I cut out each of the letters 4 times, 3 times using white cardstock and once using some pattern paper. And now I'm gluing the layers together, of course, with the pattern paper on the top. I use some gel glue to attach to the layers, and now I'm using that same Distress Oxide Uncharted Mariner to ink the edges and even the surface of these letters, just to make the color a little bit more intense like the colors in the pattern papers. And it takes a little bit of time to cut out all of these layers, not so much with this 3-letter word, but I really like the dimension that those layers of cardstock add to the title. So I think it's worth putting that extra time in so that the title will have dimension like other elements that are on the page. So I'm going to attach my title down in the right-hand side of the layout. I'm going to include a couple of little butterflies by the title just so that I have some butterflies in both the large cluster and the title. Then I added some ATG adhesive to the back of that really big cluster. I will go back later on and use some gel glue when I'm sure that I like where it's positioned and I've had a chance to look at it for a little while. I like to have the option to move things around. That's why I love having that ATG adhesive, but it does require me to go back and add some wet glue later on. Otherwise, that ATG adhesive will not hold that foam in place indefinitely. Now I'm using a little bit of that same Finnabair heavy gesso to put some highlights on the edges of the flowers. I just think that this adds a nice little touch to those beautiful Prima flowers. They're beautiful on their own, but I think it adds just a nice little extra touch. Each month I make somewhere between 4 and at the most 7 layouts with each of my Creative Scrapbook limited edition kits, and I don't always have the opportunity to edit and voice over all of the footage that I make from creating these videos, but going back and catching up on all of this footage and completing the videos, I realized that my style changes regularly. Last summer, I did the same thing. I went back and I caught up on some videos and I noticed the same thing then. It's interesting how I could see that I'm approaching some things a little differently than I am now. And some things are just phases that I go through. But one thing that is not a phase that I seem to continually do is I love to add pearls to the centers of my butterflies. I love the look of the pearls on the butterflies, and I love to have things of all different textures on the page, so I really think that it adds a lot to the page. And I was really lucky that I had just the right colors. I had some orange pearls for the orange butterflies and some teal pearls for the teal butterflies, and I had them in the correct sizes. I find that with embellishments like these, you never know what color you're going to need. So whenever I pick out things like pearls and enamel dots, I really don't pick out colors that I like. I usually try to buy as many different colors of a particular embellishment as I can afford because I know that I will use all of the colors at some point. That's why I really like to get these pearls. These pearls are relatively inexpensive compared to some other embellishments, and I think they're absolutely beautiful. I also love the way they come in all different sizes. I find that most manufacturers who make these types of pearls will have at least 3 different sizes in a pack. These are made by Eyelet Outlet. I use these a lot, but there are quite a few different manufacturers who offer the same types of things, and I think the pearls suit these types of layouts a little bit better than things like enamel dots. Although, don't get me wrong, I use plenty of enamel dots too. I wanted to add something to the top of the layout, and there are these really pretty lace laser cuts in the kit. One is a little bit of a darker blue and one is a little bit of lighter color. So I inked the edges of both of these strips once again with the Uncharted Mariner Distress Oxide. I'm going to cover half the layout with the darker strip and the other half with the lighter strip, and I knew I wanted to put something in the center so that you wouldn't see the seam between the 2 pieces of lace. And for that, I decided to use a die cut button, this cute little orange button. Right now, I'm just trimming it a little bit, and then I'm inking the edges with some abandoned coral, which I think is the perfect color to go with this collection. And then I just attached it in the center. And then I'm just going to trim away those little excess pieces of lace. But of course, I'm going to save them because you never know where you're going to be able to use some little embellishment like that. Now I'm going back in with those branches that I had cut out and positioned earlier, but now I'm going to attach them directly down to the background paper. Again, using the ATG adhesive, and that will hold these items down indefinitely because these are made of paper. It's just the foam that the ATG adhesive won't hold on a prolonged basis. I also added a little embellishment underneath Sweetest Boy. It's a little heart die cut, and I thought that it would look cute with some pearls on it as well, so I used the same 2 colors of pearls that I used on the butterflies. And I think the pearls look cute, kind of like jewels on a charm. So once I had added the jewels down, I was thinking that I wanted to utilize these layers of flowers that I had peeled off of that larger flower earlier. So I clustered them together and then I put some glue on them and I just tucked them underneath some of the layers of the cluster. That would allow you to see that there was a little pop of color there, but you wouldn't have to actually see the whole flower because there isn't a whole flower. It's just these couple of petals. So I think that was perfect because that spot needed a little something. And then I, of course, had to add some of the white gesso, but then I decided to go back into the other flowers and add another layer to some of those as well. You might notice that my paintbrush is very old, but I think that these old bristle brushes are perfect for things like adding gesso to layouts. Then I reposition the orange butterfly on the frame for, I think, the third time, and that is the last touch. This layout is complete, and here are some close-ups. As always, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to view my video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions or if you just have something that you would like to share, please feel free to leave me a comment. I try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you take a look in the description box, you'll find a link to the My Creative Scrapbook website and then also to all of their social media where you can check out all of the current beautiful kits and you can get lots of inspiration from all of the members of the design team. I hope you have a fantastic day and I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.